Welcome to the Koge Podcast, Episode 4. I am your host, Saul Spinoza, and the topic for today is vocations. How does one discern their vocation? Let's get into it. Okay, first of all, what is a vocation? There are two, the general vocation and the specific vocation. The general vocation is the same for everybody on earth. It is to go to heaven and be with God forever, sharing in His happiness and His grace and glory. The second one being the specific vocation, which varies between each and every person. It is the specific path to heaven chosen by God for you. So, what are the vocations? Well, the vocations are the married life, priesthood, and religious life. Now, how do we discern our vocation? Well, first, humility, right? True humility expects God's help and grace. We need to be humble and accept whatever God's will is for us. Don't be prideful. Don't impose our will on God. Rather, we should accept God's will. That's the first step. Be open to the will of God, right? Pray every day. Pray every day for the grace to know our vocation, because God isn't going to give what we don't ask for, right? He wants us to be seeking His grace and His will, and grow in persevering. We have to persevere to know our vocation. We also need to be doing penance, because by doing penance, we choose the hard choices, to give us the choice to choose freely. Our Lord says, unless we do prayer and penance, we will perish. We need both. And, just every day asking God to give you the knowledge of your vocation. And I think that since the religious life is the most surest and holiest way, or the holiest and most surest way to heaven, that should be the first vocation to investigate, right? So first we would investigate the religious life, and if we find out it's not for us, then we go on to the next vocation to investigate. Because even though it's the surest and the holiest way, or the surest and the fastest way, it's not the best choice for everyone. God gave us different graces and different paths for us to go. And remember that our vocation is just to help us to go to heaven and bring others with us, ultimately. And just remember, unless you know your vocation already, then you should be investigating the religious life. So it'd be better not to date yet. If you're, in the beginning stages, don't date, because that beauty and attractiveness of marriage can often blind you from the religious life, because the religious life isn't that attractive. And dating it gives you an experience of that beauty and attractiveness. So we need to first look into the religious life. If it's not for us, then we could go into dating, or stuff like that, or courting, which will probably be another podcast for a later video. But just remember, but this whole time that you're doing all this, go to a good priest. Ask him for tips and advice on how to find your vocation. He'll, if he's a good spiritual director, he'll be trying to find out more about you to know what, your faults and your virtues are. He'll help you to find out what's your vocation. I mean, because and God will give him the grace to help you in that. So yeah, go to a good priest and yeah, for spiritual direction. And we got to remember that in every vocation there's certain qualifications. There's physical qualifications, so we should be able to do the work required in the vocations. We should have the physical strength to do those vocations, such as if it's missionary work, probably if you're handicapped, you're like in a wheelchair or crutches, it's probably not the best for you to go and become a missionary. Probably that's not your vocation, because God often gives us the means to do our vocations. And the next qualification is intellectual qualifications. So we have to be if we're becoming a priest, for example, if we want to become a priest, usually God will give us the intellectual qualification. We have to be able to understand what we're studying in the seminary to, so that we could be able to better explain to our flock, our spiritual children, once we're a priest. We also have to have the moral qualifications, which we should be able to live habitually in the state of grace, and we, follow to the best of our ability the teachings of the church, natural law, and later on, if we become a priest, and we weren't living it habitually in the state of grace, and we're committing acts of impurity, morally sinful ones, that could lead us to commit very grave sins and scandals when we become a priest. So we should already be probably in the illuminative stage. I think St. Thomas Aquinas talks about that. A person that wants to become a priest should already be in the illuminative stage of the spiritual life, which I'll get into that in the next podcast. And also, we shouldn't have emotional disorders such as, same-sex attraction, to get into the religious life. Into the priesthood, and probably the religious life, because if you're a guy and you like other guys, then it probably is not good for you to go to a monastery where there's only guys, or for a priest, that's where all these scandals come from. These people infiltrated the church, and the seminaries weren't asking about their, if they had these disorders of same-sex attraction or these tendencies, and these scandals happened, and it gave it gives a bad reputation to the church when the clergy are committing these grievous sins. So remember, just prayer, penance, and we've already looked at the physical, intellectual, and moral qualifications. Now we're gonna go into a bit about. We're gonna talk about what the Catechism says about each vocation. Just a little bit about what the signs are, or things that would prevent us from joining that vocation. So wait, let me see here. Okay, this is from Baltimore Catechism 3, 197D. I recommend that you get this book, Baltimore Catechism 3. I think I have right here. This book right here. Where is it? Can you see that? Yeah. Baltimore Catechism 3. I read it in my high school, homeschool. I'm homeschooled in Seton Homeschool Study. and I read it in ninth grade. So this is where I got my information on this is where I'm getting the information. So in Baltimore Catechism 3 and 197D, it says, any Catholic may voluntarily seek admission to the religious life who is free from legal impediments, has the right intention, and is fitted to discharge the duties of the particular institute of his choice. So it's saying that pretty much any Catholic is able to seek permission to, or seek admission to join the religious life if we don't have any legal troubles or impediments, as it says right here. And for example, married persons, obviously, if you're married, you can't join the religious life. You're already in a different vocation. You have certain responsibilities you can't neglect. And persons under 15 years of age, as well as those whose parents need their help. So, yeah, if you're 15 years under age, you're not able to go because that's a legal impediment. Obviously, if you grew older, then you could go. And it says also those whose parents need their help. Is because obviously if your parents have Alzheimer's or some other thing and they need your help, but if you leave to the religious life, you'd be neglecting them, if they have these certain issues. Okay, so married persons and persons under 15 years of age, as well as those whose parents need their help, are prevented by legal impediments from embracing the religious state. A person who wishes to please God, to save his soul, or to help his neighbor has a right intention and seeking admission to the religious state. The novitiate of the religious state is a period during which a vocation is tested and superiors and subjects are enabled to decide freely on the mutual obligations that are assumed by public profession in their religious state. So it is saying here that when you're in the novitiate stage of the religious life, that means that you're not into it completely. You're just testing whether this is for you or not. And the superiors or you are able to decide whether it's not for you. The superiors can't force you to stay, but what I mean is that they're able to tell you that it's not for you. So they're able to tell you to that it's not for you and you have to go. But you can decide if you're going to stay or go. Because sometimes we feel calling to this vocation, but it's not really for us, Maybe God is calling us to do something else, or maybe God wanted us to go to the novitiate stage just to learn something that will help us in our vocation, in our true vocation, which might be marriage or priesthood or whatever. By profession, members of the religious life publicly assume the obligations of their states through the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. These obligations are assumed for a definite period of time or for life. Okay, so it's saying right here that once you become a religious, when you enter the religious life completely, you take the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. In poverty, you can't own anything. You only can borrow from the order from which you are joining. Like if you see a religious person, like a monk or a monk or a nun or something like that, and they have a car, they don't own it. They're just borrowing it from the order because they need it. And chastity, they cannot get married or have any relations with anyone. And obedience, they have to obey the superior in everything except for obviously sin. They cannot obey them in sin, obviously. In the religious life, all these things will help you know just by how you are right now. If you see that your qualifications physically, intellectually, and morally, if you feel Usually God gives us these qualifications if he wants us to go into a certain vocation. And we can see that, if you're not smart enough to understand all the studies in the seminary, then obviously maybe you're not called to it, because there was Saint John Vianney, and he wasn't the brightest student out there in the priesthood, but he was certainly called to a vocation to the priesthood, and he answered that call, and he was called to persevere, especially in the studies of Latin, because he had a trouble in Latin. And maybe we can also pray to Saint John Vianney, like before, if we're a seminarian. If you're a seminarian and you're gonna take a test that's very important into joining into becoming a priest, then you could ask Saint John Vianney to help to pray for you, to help you to pass the test, and so anyways, yeah. So once we know that we're not called to religious life, then we can look into the other vocations. In the Baltimore Catechism, the one I was talking about, in 452A, it says, actually 452, some of the preliminary signs of vocations to the priesthood are, first, that the boy or young man be capable of living habitually in the state of grace. I already mentioned that before. Second, that he be attracted to the priesthood and manifests this attraction by frequent confession and communion, by a virtuous life, and by a love of serving Mass. So it's saying right here that he has to have an attraction to the priesthood, and he manifests that attraction, or he grows that attraction by frequent confession and communion, and also by a love of serving Mass. Especially if you're discerning for the priesthood, it's good to serve Mass, to have an experience of how the priest feels, or just an experience of being close to God on the sanctuary and close to the altar, witnessing a priest. Especially if you go to like Latin Mass, you serve at a Latin Mass, you see the beauty and the reverence and the love coming from that priest, and going towards God, and you see God's love and beauty, because when you see all that reverence and the incense and the the beautiful altar, and the beautiful vestments of the priest, it makes you realize how beautiful God really is, and it's very good to serve Mass. It helps you discern. Okay, anyways, continuing. B, those who are called by God to be priests ordinarily received no special revelation to this effect. God expects all to use the gifts of reason and of grace in determining their state of life. So God is not going to throw a book over your head like, I'm called to priesthood now. No, it's like he wants us to use our grace and reason to be able to find out what our vocation is, and perseverance and praying to him. Because there are sometimes what's it called? Well, for example, there is a priest who had a young man come to him complaining about of God not telling him, clearly what his vocation was. And he was very troubled and almost being tortured by the fact that he didn't know what his vocation was. And the priest asked him, would you be praying as much if you knew what your vocation was since the beginning? And the young man replied, no. He realized that God wants us to pray and to ask him what our vocation is, because it helps us grow closer and build that perseverance and that love for the vocation, and to learn more about it. He wants us to pray, obviously, always, and maybe by persevering to know that vocation, God sees that we really want this vocation. We really want to follow God, you know? Anyways, yeah, but we gotta remember that being a priest is very, very important. It's, we have to be a representation of Christ, you know? When a priest, does the consecration, he's acting in persona Christi, in the person of Christ. He's, what's it called? He's representing Christ here on earth in that moment. So yeah, just keep in mind about the priesthood that, you remember, living habitually in the state of grace, having attraction to the priesthood and the sacraments, you know, serving mass, and obviously be a boy. You have to be male. There's only two genders, remember? And women are not allowed to become priests. Only men. So you have to be a man. And okay, now for married state. 458. What is the chief duty of husband and wife in the marriage state? The chief duty of husband and wife in the marriage state is to be faithful to each other and to provide in every way for the welfare of the children God may give them. So A, the duty of being faithful to each other means that the privileges of husband and wife may be shared by them alone. So the privileges like living together, doing the marital act. So B, parents by the will of God have the primary right and obligation to feed, clothe, shelter, and educate their children. This God-given right may not be unjustly interfered with by any power on earth. Any law which takes away or lessens this right and obligation is unjust. Okay, well, it's very controversial, but you got to know your duty, you know, in the married state. It shouldn't be controversial. But now with all this feminism, this feminist agenda going around, and you got to know your duty first as a husband, you got to be the breadwinner. You got to be the one providing, obviously spiritual, but also economical way. So you have to be able to feed your children, obviously, and educate your children. You have to teach them, obviously, like their school or whatever. But I mean, also you gotta educate them in the faith. Teach them about God, about the saints. Read them the stories of the saints, and you know, make sure they're going to confession. They're in the state of grace. You know, all of that. And the duty of the wife is to stay at home. And there are some exceptions. Like if you're a single mom, that's an exception because you have to go to work because there's no husband there to provide. So you have to go to work. But that doesn't mean it's still good for the child. You know, and it's hard to, it's hard to hear that and say that because it's true. It's still going to affect the child in a way. They need their dad. And they need you in the house. But obviously it's an exception because there's no other way. Or else it can't feed you or anything. I'm going to have a podcast in the future about feminism for sure. And masculinity and the duties of wife and husband. So yeah. Women they have to stay home and take care of their children. They can't be going to work. They have to stay home and make sure their children are doing, the right things. And especially nowadays, like to educate your children, it's better to homeschool. Because now in the public school, I mean right now there's all this COVID stuff and the public schools are closed, and it's online. I'm not sure how it is online, but I'm pretty sure it's still the same. They're not teaching your kids good stuff, They're giving them the sex education and also the quality of the education is not good. Like in Seton homeschool, for example, that's the only thing I'm able to talk about because that's the only homeschool I've been in and that I'm in still right now. They make you work your butt off, in essays and in math, and you got to work hard in Seton, but it's worth it. You're actually learning things, and especially the religion, man. The religion is awesome in here. in here, and also they made me read Baltimore Catechism 1 2 times, and Baltimore Catechism 2 they made me read it 3 times because I had to read it once a year. So when I was in 4th grade, they made me read it once, and then 5th grade another time, and then 6th grade Baltimore Catechism 2. 7th grade they made me read it again, and 8th grade they made me read it again. And now I read Baltimore Catechism 3 in 9th grade last year. I read it. Well, actually, no, the beginning of this year I read it. Right now I'm in 10th grade. They make you memorize answers to questions concerning the faith and morals. It's very good. I recommend Seton Home Study School to every parent, because now the educational system in the public schools is horrible, and private schools, and Catholic schools. That's shameful. It should be like the best in the Catholic schools, but it's probably even worse, because they're probably giving bad theology in there. So I recommend, Seton Home Study School. It's very good. Anyways, so yeah, husband, you go to work, and be the strong, religious, good Catholic man, and the good example for your children, and take your kids out to the park. Whenever you have time, go take your kid. Whenever you're talking to him, talk to him about God, or about manly things, manly virtues. Take him to your job, or if you can. Sometimes you can't. Go take him to work out or something like that. And for the mom, you gotta be at the home. If you want the best for your children, you gotta be at the home. And you're gonna make mistakes, but it's gonna get better along the way. It's gonna be hard because many people are gonna criticize you for deciding to stay home and for having a lot of children and stuff like that. So yeah, those are the duties of the parents. Ultimately, to take your children to heaven. That's the ultimate end. That's what it's all about. All of our vocations, to take ourselves and others to God. And what did the saints say about vocations? Saint Alphonsus says that it is not wise to tell your parents of your religious vocation, because a lot of times parents can interfere with your vocation, because a lot of times they're thinking about their temporal welfare, which is natural. It's just natural for them to want you to stay with them, for forever almost at home. But, we gotta fly from the nest at one point. Like, for example, St. Gerard, he had to run away from his home. I'm not sure if his parents were against it or something, but he ran away from home to join the religious life. Specifically the Redemptorists. When he was crawling out of the window to run away, his mom saw him and asked him why he was going, or where he was going, and he said that he was going away to be a saint. Which is exactly what it is. To follow your vocation is become a saint. And we can't let anyone stop that. Even our own parents, which is, can be, it's a very hard situation when it's your parents that are stopping you from going to the vocation you wanted. Like St. Thomas Aquinas had to go against his mom's wishes, his parents' wishes, and he became a Dominican priest because he knew that was for him. That was his vocation. God had revealed it to him. He knew it. It's a bad thing to be guilt-tripped into vocation, because there are some times where people are like at church, the old church ladies, which are, of course, they're well-meaning. They don't mean harm or anything. But sometimes they come up to a young man and they're like, "Oh, you're praying. Your vocation is to become a priest, right?" Or something like that. And sometimes you feel guilt tripped into a vocation, almost like you feel bad because like if, for example, you feel like if you've investigated a lot and you feel like the religious life is not for you and priesthood is not for you, and right now you feel like marriage is your vocation, and then all of a sudden someone comes up and says that or something, sometimes it causes some people to be guilt tripped into a vocation. So just remember that sometimes it could help when somebody says that, but you got to remember that it isn't. You're not trying to please others, because there's some people I talk to. They're like, but I always wanted to become a priest, but now I'm seeing that my vocation is something else. What do I do? Because everybody I know thinks I'm gonna become a priest. All you gotta remember is that it's not about them. It's about God. And you shouldn't be joining a vocation just to please people. It's to please God, And for going back to being open to God's will, parents, teach your children to be open to God's will from an early age. To teach them the prayer. This prayer goes like this: God, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. God, show me my vocation, so that I may please Thee, and to save my soul to be happy with You forever and in heaven. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach them that prayer to say every day. But not only must they be open to God's will, you must be open to God's will. Your parents have to be open to God's will for their lives. Because it's too often that I hear that somebody wants to become a priest or a religious life, or even to get married nowadays. They want to get married early, at ages 20, 19, 20, 18. It's too often that I hear that the parents are completely against it, and they're, they want their kids to wait longer, but that's not, their vocation is not about you parents. It's about them and God. And if they believe that they're called to be married early, then that's between them and God, not you. And, we got to remember that. So don't force your child into a vocation. That's between them and God. Obviously, you can give some advice or something like that, but ultimately you have to support your child into the vocation they feel called to. Remember, even Saint Teresa of Avila ran away from home to join the religious life because her father forbade it. And that doesn't mean she didn't love her father. In fact, she even sent a letter apologizing to him for what she had done, because obviously it hurts the parents, It hurts the parents. They love you so much, and they almost feel abandoned. Obviously, it's not abandonment, but that's how they take it sometimes. And yeah, just remember that. For today, I think we've went pretty far into discerning your vocation. Obviously, there's much more that I couldn't get into today, but I think I did my best in doing it in this short time. And for the resolution, just take action. Take action. Take action for your vocation, because often we can hesitate too much, or we can we got to take action. Go to, if you feel called to a seminary, just go to the seminary, see how it is. Sometimes they have like at St. Michael's Abbey a year ago, they had like a program of like, it was like a week or two where you could go and check out how it is at the seminary to see if that is the vocation for you. You got to remember also in the religious life and the priesthood, you got to look for a good seminary. There's FSSP, St. Michael's Abbey, how do you say it? ICKSP? I think that's what it's called. Um, there's other ones. Obviously, there's a lot more, and just look for good holy order. Yeah. So just take action. God is gonna lead you as long as you're living in a state of grace, trying to live your best state of grace in prayer and the sacraments and penance. God is gonna lead you. He's not gonna lead you astray. So yeah, action, and comment and like if you like this video. I'm gonna be doing a 12 podcast series on these talks that I received from the Brotherhood of Saint Dismas. They have a formation program consisting of 12 talks, and I'm gonna be giving those here on the podcast next week. Next week it's gonna be the first podcast. See y'all later. Thanks for watching. Like I said, comment, like, and subscribe, and please share this video. Comment if you have any advice on how to do my podcast better. I know sometimes it could probably get too serious or something like that. So yeah, give me an advice, or tell me what I could do better. Tell me what I do good at, and also give me topics that I could talk about in future podcasts. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.